Okay, so I don't like long introductions. All I'll say is I'm a Muslim. Claire here is an agnostic Islam enthusiast in some ways, a secular Quranist. We can talk about that at some point. And we are going to do a reaction to, I would say, a topic. Let me put it on the screen. That I would say a lot of people who are Muslim have trouble with, and I would say a lot of people would have trouble with. So let's just play the video. Hopefully, it's on the screen. Let's go
You
for
believe
it.
Israel had a right to defend itself?
Israel forfeited its right of self-defense based on its criminal abuse of the population of Gaza for 20 years.
Okay, so just to extrapolate that, it was just...
I'm very clear. There's no need for extrapolation. Israel forfeited its right to self-defense.
Does that mean then that what happened was justified?
I will stick by my formulation. Israel forfeited its right to self-defense by having Israel created a huge concentration camp in Gaza. Israel imposed a medieval blockade on Gaza, which has been characterized as a crime against humanity. Israel periodically went into Gaza on its high-tech killing sprees, what it called operations. Israel forfeited its right to self-defense.
Okay, so we're going to ask some couple of important questions that I would say, as I said, Muslims are struggling with. Why, for example, has God forgotten the Palestinians? Why is God allowing all this genocide to happen? But there are all these other questions, related questions, such as do two wrongs make a right? So if, as I forgot his name. What's his name? This guy, really famous guy.
Normal Finkelstein.
That's the one. He's saying maybe two wrongs make a right, because yes, the Zionists, let's say, have been, persecuting Palestinians for so many years. Does that mean that the Hamas can come and kill civilians, some children, take children as hostages and stuff like that? I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think? Do two wrongs make a right? Let's start with that.
Well, if those... Well, no, because the Quran...
That's about it, right? I think most people agree.
The Quran sets boundaries, so whatever you want to do, you have to do it within the, the moral system that is the moral system you're supposed to support, right? I mean, that's how it is, whatever your moral system is.
Yes, it should be clear cut. If the Quran is a clear book, as it says, then it should be clear cut what to do. And the Quran doesn't say two wrongs make a right. It's always about taking the higher moral ground, always trying to forgive, but at the same time, if you're going to fight within the rules, and the rules are really clear. For example, you can't fight non-combatants. So that includes old people, children, people who are not actually fighting you. So that's one question. And I think Norman, what do you think about Norman's answer?
I'm sorry, what was his answer?
His answer was, well, I could simplify his answer as two wrongs make the Zionists were wrong for killing Palestinians for so many years. He listed so many things that the Zionists had done wrong, and therefore he said they forfeited their right to self-defense. What was his word? Forfeited its right to self-defense. Interesting. So that he puts it that way. I would summarize his argument as the Zionists were wrong, therefore the Hamas can do wrong things as well. He wouldn't contradict Piers Morgan when he said, like, was this justified? He wouldn't say clearly, yes, it's justified. Maybe you're scared of some sort of, I don't know, legal issues or something. But like, what do you think? I mean,
Well,
do you,
I was
yeah,
thinking of Boadicea because Boadicea was his queen of.
Scotland?
No.
Oh,
Anyway, she had a fight. I think she was based in Essex. Anyway, the Romans came and disrespected her, and she led a rebellion against the Romans, and people think, oh wow, she was so courageous. But what happened was the Romans just came back and crushed her after
hmm.
she slaughtered all those Romans. So you can keep doing this tit for tat violence, but I'm just appalled that nobody ever thinks to use theological arguments. So on X, you get all the Muslims saying, "Oh, these Jews have killed so many of us," and it's like, well, I'm afraid a lot of people don't care. A lot of people don't like you, and maybe the people who don't
So
like
tell
Jews,
me, who doesn't like who?
these Westerners. I mean, they just can't make up their minds whether who they hate more, Jews or Muslims. So
Okay, yeah,
so the ones who pretend that they care, are just saying, oh, Jews are so wicked, and what they do is throw, the corpses of Palestinians at Jews, not because they really care about them, but it's just like, oh, Jews are so evil. Look at blah blah blah.
you don't think the whole world cares about the kids being shot in the head and stuff like that? You don't think you don't think
Okay, I mean, I'm
it's
sure some
fake?
of them do, but I'm just saying it's not going to do anything. People just scroll past it, on Twitter, and the people think, oh well, what do you expect me to do? I've turned up to a few demos, and then what?
Oh, you don't think it's having an effect? That's interesting.
Well, is anybody doing anything?
Okay, yeah, sure, you're right. That okay, it's difficult for. I can see your point of view that nothing actually has changed. That's true. But I think it's becoming increasingly difficult for governments to carry on as they are, and they are giving less weapons. There are countries that have stopped giving weapons, haven't they?
Well, I mean, Assad has been toppled,
Yeah.
so the neocons are still riding high.
Okay, so basically you're saying okay, but that's a separate issue, isn't it? I mean, it's
No, we're talking about, we're talking about Western foreign policy and the
yeah,
neocons and their neocon wars, and it's always Muslims who are the victims of American foreign policy. Isn't that what
sure,
we're talking about? And obviously the Palestinians are the victims of American foreign policy. Some people
sure,
want to think that it's the Jews who control America, but you could easily just as you could just as easily claim that Israel is an American colony. Would the Israelis do what they do without the support of America, without the unwavering support of America and
sure,
Europe? They wouldn't dare to do half the things they would. I mean,
sure. Yeah, they couldn't. Yeah, they wouldn't. Yeah,
they
they're
wouldn't
they're
and they
working
couldn't.
together. Yeah,
And so the whole purpose of American foreign policy is to get the Jews to fight the Arabs and then say, oh, but we have to protect the Jews from the Arabs who want to kill them. And they are deliberately causing conflict and just never resolving the matter because they don't want the matter to be resolved. They want
yeah.
they want the
Who's
Jews.
causing conflict? I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm just trying to understand how you view things. So who's causing conflict?
America.
But in the Palestinian situation, how's that working?
Okay, I don't know. Okay, do you accept that America has a global empire?
Yes, as usually
And
an economic empire and all sorts of different ways to pull strings. Yeah,
therefore, but it's a marine empire, and do you agree that Israel has access to the Mediterranean and the Red Sea.
Sure.
So for geopolitical reasons, you'd want to, because before that, Britain controlled Israel, and it's also a very prestigious colony to have,
Right.
So
It's like a central position, and it
East meets
ensures
West.
shipping access to different places. Is that right? Okay.
So you'd want if you ran a global empire, you'd want to, the British were in Aden, which is Yemen, right? Because it's at a choke point of the Red Sea.
Sure.
With the Straits of Hormuz and all the oil tankers going up and down.
Yeah,
and
they
stuff
go
like
through
that. I
that.
don't know
Yeah.
the details, but
Yeah.
And so the narrative for the American empire is we have to do this because we're the good guys and we need to protect the Jews, right? That's what they
Right.
have to say, rather than we're the number one superpower of the world and we've got nukes and we're just gonna tell you everyone what to do. I mean that's not that doesn't sound very nice for them, does it?
Sure. So they need a reason. Okay.
Yeah, and the reason is the white man's burden is to protect the Jews.
I've never heard it quite that way, but okay. Let me ask you: has God forgotten the Palestinians? Let's go straight into make sure we're clearly answering the question. So,
Yes,
what do you think?
so I'm saying that there are arguments you can make about these things. So earlier I was saying, all the Muslims ever do on social media is, oh, look at the dead children and blah, blah. And I'm saying
Sure.
that doesn't work because actually no one likes you and deep down no one cares, and if they do care, they don't care enough to do anything about it. They're not going to risk, their jobs or anything to,
But people are
and anyway,
risking their
even if
jobs.
they
People
do,
in
they get
Google have lost
clobbered by
their
the
jobs.
cops. Sorry, what?
People are losing their jobs in sacrificing. People in Google are refusing to work on these kind of AI projects that are shooting, targeting Palestinians, and they're losing their jobs. And those people care somewhat.
Yes, okay. Those who demonstrated at Columbia University not so long ago,
Yeah,
they got clobbered by the cops, and we've noticed a different that the cops are taking on Indian methods of policing, which is basically to turn up with sticks and disperse a crowd by beating the crowd with sticks.
sure.
So, so there is, an intensification of police brutality, and I guess eventually people will shut up. But I'm saying, Muslims trying to be bigger victims than Jews are not really kind of getting their message across, because there's a kind of compassion fatigue for Westerners, because Westerners say, oh, but we have our problems, and oh, immigration, and oh, whatever they go on about. And
Sure.
and therefore, I've been trying to say to Muslims, it's like, well, if you accept that, if you believe God exists, then
Yeah.
I guess you would see suffering as punishment for sin.
Okay.
This is what the Jews.
That's
This is what
very
Jews are supposed to understand. Well, the religious
Yeah.
ones. So if you understand that suffering is punishment for sin, then it's like, oh, obviously I've done something bad because I'm being punished. What did I do wrong? And then you.
So you're saying the Palestinians? This is nice and controversial. I like getting into controversial things. If the Palestinians are suffering this genocide, they have sinned and they're suffering because of it.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. And I can actually, this is super controversial, but I actually agree. Although I don't agree with the genocide at the same time. Do you know what I mean?
Oh no, of course I'm not agreeing with it, but we're just trying to explain it, and
Yes.
we're just positing
Yes.
reasons why God, if He exists, would allow the Palestinians to suffer.
Yes.
Or any
And we
group
can
of
go into the
people.
details as to why, even according to the Koran,
which mentions the
Yeah.
story of Job, right? I forget how what you call him.
Well, you might be thinking of a different verse, but you could bring that argument as well. But the Quran talks about the Palestinian area. It's called the Promised Land or something in the Quran, and it says the righteous will inherit it. Inherit gives the sense that you don't even have to make an effort; it will just be put into your lap if you're simply righteous. That suggests, therefore, that the Palestinians are not righteous. And so seems really, really harsh, given the genocide that's happening at the moment. But this is not supposed to be harsh. It's supposed to be like telling like tough truths so that they can get out of this problem. Just for people who are listening who are thinking we're hating on Palestinians while they're being killed. Does that kind of make sense, what I'm saying? We're not hating on them. We're trying to give them tough
Thank you
love.
for clarifying.
Yeah.
But this is a
Yeah.
brutal truth that a lot of people cannot quite accept. That
Yeah.
because I go back to the story of Job, who is called Ayub in Islam, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So basically, Job was. I mean, this is a story of Satan and God, and Job was praying to God, thanking God for all his, good fortune and children and wealth, etc. And Satan said to God, well, he wouldn't be thanking you if he never got anything he wanted. He's happy now and thanking you because he's got his children and his wealth and his businesses are doing well. What do you think is going to happen when it doesn't go well for Job? Right? I mean, that's a story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And God said, well, he would still thank me, and God was proven right. But then, between Job's fortune being restored after, his children were killed and he lost his fortune and he erupted in boils and had, skin disease and all kinds of things. A lot of people were speculating, like, did you do something wrong, Job? Maybe, there's something you weren't telling us about, etc. And the moral of the story, which I do think people get now, is that because Job didn't give up his belief that God would eventually restore him, he was rewarded. Because if he had, as his wife advised him to do, to curse God and then die, well, then I guess nobody would have heard of Job.
Yeah. Yes, it's an interesting question. Is it punishment or a temporary trial? And is all suffering actual punishment? So in the case of Job, it didn't seem that it's punishment. It's a trial that he could handle.
Well, yes, because one thing about Jews that I've discovered is that they're supposed to thank God for misfortune. I know, they don't really do that, but that's what they did in the olden days when they did take.
Yeah, and that's also an Islamic principle as well, that everything that happens to a Muslim is for their good.
Yes, so even if you didn't do anything wrong, you're being taught a lesson. Right, I mean that's the story. Either you're being punished because you did something wrong, or even if you didn't do anything wrong, you're being taught an important lesson through your trial and your suffering.
Yeah,
and even the Christians would say, "Oh, these things are sent to try us."
Yeah,
try our faith, I suppose, to see what we're going to do. And you were the one who said, well, this life is an examination hall, and when we die, we're going to go to somewhere much better. But obviously, this is an examination hall, and we and I guess we're being tested for our ability to fully comprehend what it is we're supposed to do. And maybe people forget.
Sure. Okay. Cool. So I'm just trying to make sure we're answering all the questions. I can see we're kind of looking, we're talking about, has God forgotten the Palestinians, or you're giving the big picture of what could be happening. Okay, so I think we agree that God hasn't So is God allowing Palestinians to suffer? I suppose my answer, and it seems your answer, is something like they're suffering because they're doing something wrong. And I would
Or
say
Muslims are not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
yes. Okay. So,
So
I mean,
instead of
there's the
whinging
wider
on
Muslims.
X, they could
Yeah.
be using some other idea.
Oh, sorry. What are the Muslims on X doing? Sorry again?
Well, what Muslims seem to be doing is to post videos of atrocities being committed against children in the hope of
Sure.
exciting our outrage and sympathy, and
I
they've
mean,
been doing it for over a year, right?
yeah.
Of children, dead or dying or very
Are you
injured.
saying that's the wrong thing to do? Because I think that, I mean, first of all, what's happening is there are videos coming out of Gaza, and it's good to expose evil. So I don't think that's wrong by itself. But I think what you're saying is they're
Something more
only
is
playing the
required.
victim game, and they should do something better than that.
Well, yes, because I mean, the Jews do it the most of all. They do. They're the world's biggest victim, according to Hollywood, right?
Sure, yeah, I know they because they control Hollywood and they keep reminding the rest of the world that they are victims. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and for some reason, people instinctively, sympathize with Jews more because of Hollywood and that their whole
sure,
story, and it's like, oh, but we're scared of Muslims because they're terrorists and
sure,
ISIS and whatever.
yeah,
And also that there are many more of them, and they're in the West, and these Westerners don't like it, and they're scared of
sure.
Muslims.
Okay, so I like where you're going with this in some ways because you're saying the Muslims are just playing the victim card. I think that might be slightly unfair because it is right to highlight injustices,
Oh, I'm certainly
but
not
it's
saying they
not the
shouldn't do
only.
that.
Yeah, let's talk about the solution because actually that's what my videos are all about. Not, I mean, it's good to clarify whether one argument is justified or not, like Norman Finkelstein's argument. Is it right? I think he's a great person in many ways. He's got lots of arguments that make a lot of sense. But in this case, I think he's wrong. And I'm going to go into some of the things that he said that are wrong, I think. Like somebody called Nat Turner. I don't know American history, but apparently he was a slave who. Do you know much about Nat Turner and
I've never
his
heard of him. I don't.
Really, he keeps talking about him. He's like some slave who did a revolt and he killed lots of innocent civilians or something to gain his freedom in America. It's like, and
I really don't know. I don't see
okay, well, we will
what
talk.
that has
I'll
to do
talk
with it.
about like my little knowledge of the scenario because Norman Finkelstein compares Palestinians to that situation where you can kill civilians if you are being oppressed, essentially. So we'll come back to that. But I like solutions. Do you have a solution
Yes,
to the Palestinian problem? I do. Go
yes.
for it. And I'll come from the Quranic point of view in a minute. But I'm interested to see what you say, Claire.
Well, I'm also coming from the Quranic point of view,
Oh yes, of
and I'm
course you are.
saying
Yeah.
that there are lots of arguments. It's like, well, obviously, Muslims have done something wrong because part of the problem of Dawah is, well, if Islam is such a wonderful religion, why do Muslims suffer? Why are Muslims
Right.
being kicked around? Why
Yeah.
are Muslims the eternal victims of Western imperialists? Clearly,
Interesting.
the Western imperialists are better than Muslims because they're more powerful, and Muslims are
Sure.
being, this
So
is
that's a
kind of,
logical argument because if they're, I mean, it sounds harsh to say Western imperialists who are doing so much damage around the world are better, but there is an argument to say that, well, they must be doing something right, even in an evil sense, I guess. And it's not just evil; it's just they were able to accrue technological power to be able to have that supremacy. Therefore, they're more educated. How comes they're more educated? So do you know what I mean? That's actually an argument in favor of these Western imperialists. So I can see your point of view, even though it seems really harsh, but I still see your point of view. Solution, though, what's the solution?
Well, the solution was kind of what I was suggesting earlier. It's like you can go through a list of the things that you know didn't do. I hear an echo.
Okay, sorry, maybe it's me, my rubbish kind of. Okay, I'm going to reduce the volume on my side. Where am I doing? Sound go down.
Right.
Is that any better?
Okay.
Oh,
I don't hear that. I can still hear
yeah.
the echo. Sorry, I do.
Yeah.
Sorry, just
Oh, I think I might be. Yeah. Controls. Oh my God. Yeah. Wait. Oh, that it doesn't seem to be getting lower, even though I'm just telling it to go lower. So it might be. So. Oh, maybe here. Maybe a TV remote. Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
just talk to see if yeah, I can still hear it. Maybe I should just make an effort of ignoring it.
Yeah.
Um, now I've forgotten. What,
So
oh yes, I
solution.
think
Solution.
yes. So it's like the story of Job. You know, when you know his friends came round to sympathise, and they said, "Did you do this? Did you do that? Could you, you know, whatever?" And this is something Muslims could be doing. And so Muslims could just go back to the Quran and say, "Have we perfectly obeyed all the commandments of Allah in the Quran?"
Cool.
And
Yeah.
have they or haven't they? Or are they not even? I don't think it even occurred to them to think, well, are we obeying? How many commandments of Allah are there in the Quran? Are we obeying
Right.
them all? I get the impression, you know, actually, you know, because of secular Quranism, and you know, I actually asked a few Muslims, like, well, have you got a list of you know the commandments of Allah that you're supposed to be obeying? And I always get a vague answer, like, oh, nobody has that list, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, there are all these, you know, positive commandments and prohibitions, and you know, if you're not following them perfectly, that could be one of the reasons why you're being
Yeah,
punished.
okay, and that ties into the argument, and this sounds again really harsh on Palestinians who are being suffering at the moment. But first of all, it's a Muslim thing called something called taqwa. Taqwa means to, it can be translated in
Conscious
different
God
ways: God
consciousness.
awareness, God fear, and you should constantly be questioning yourself. What are you doing wrong? That's the nature of however, you know, even if you're like giving money to charity, you should be like, why am I doing it? Am I doing it for the right reasons? Constantly questioning every detail of what you do. So that's not against this. It is, sorry, it's totally in line with the Islamic value to question yourself. So I agree with you, Claire, in that sense, in that way. And it also ties in with what I said was that I would say the Quran solution to this problem. If a solution to the problem is that Palestinians regain the land, for example, people might think that's not the solution. But if that's the solution, then God says, well, all you have to do is be righteous. And if they're not gaining the land, therefore they're not righteous, and therefore they basically God agrees with you, Claire, that they're not being righteous enough. They're doing something wrong. And as I said before, and I've got an interesting comment from white Muslim women, so we'll respond to that in a minute. I've put a document in the description saying, you know, what, like interviews with Palestinians before the war, but not in Gaza, but in the West Bank, by a very interesting channel called the Ask Question. I can't remember, but it's in the description. Basically, it's a person who lives in Israel, and he asks difficult questions on both sides. And for example, Palestinians men think it's okay to be adulterous. It's on camera. Okay. So, and there are all sorts of things like that, I guess. And even if you don't accept that, you have to accept that the way Hamas attacked on October 7th, even though they've been oppressed for so many years and it's cruel and we should sympathize in some way with, their suffering. Two wrongs don't make a right, and they attacked civilians, not army people, as far as I can tell. And at least they've certainly taken, as far as we know, hostages who are civilians, including kids, I believe, and definitely old people. So those things are not Islamic. The Islam, and I've put it. I'm not pointing at every verse of the Quran. If you question, if you think I'm wrong, we can go through those verses. Anybody in the non-live comments, if you're not interested, if you're not, right now watching this, but do check out the references. It says you can only fight people who are attacking you, basically combatants. So they Palestinians are doing lots of things wrong, shooting even crappy rockets into Israel. They don't know where it's going to land, therefore it's wrong. That's not Islamic. So a solution theologically is simply to do the right thing, which you're saying, Claire. But some people might say, what is if you're not a Muslim and you sympathize, and I think people should sympathize with Palestinians, with their children being killed and all these terrible things. How can this theological solution actually practically solve the problem they're in? How can simply just being good solve the problem?
Well, no, I'm
I've
not saying
got a
just
very
be good.
clear-cut
I'm
answer,
saying
but
that,
what do you think?
I'm saying there are lots of things that Muslims just don't even know about in their book. So,
Sure.
Chapter 18, verse 4, I don't know if I've discussed it with you. Have I?
Is it the what's it called? Telling the Christians that they're idolaters?
Yes, admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son.
Yeah.
And I keep asking the question, did any Muslim leader of any Muslim country at any time after the death of Muhammad ever do this? And the answer
So
is
did they
no.
write an official letter saying you are doing your go to Christian countries, write an official letter to their government, if there is such a thing
Or
as
just ask, how is Christianity not idolatry? And then they'll say, it's not idolatry to worship Jesus if Jesus is God. And then you ask the next obvious question, how is Jesus God? And then they have no
Sure.
answer.
Sure. I mean, I don't see people writing letters to them, I guess. So you're right in that sense.
They won't even, do it.
Sure.
And white Muslim woman knows.
But no.
That
But okay. We agree. Let's say we agree that Muslims are doing lots of things wrong.
They can't even do this. They can't even ask a question. It's not
Sure.
even, I'm asking them to donate or whatever. They can't even ask this question. And white Muslim woman, she just says, oh, it's been already done. And it's like, when? When was it ever done? And it was never done. And it's like, no, who cares? Let's move on.
Okay,
That her typical reaction.
Let's get
the reaction of every other Muslim that I've spoken to.
Okay, let me quickly lay out this practical solution based on what the Quran is saying, of being simply righteous actually is incredibly powerful. I will cite just the case of Muslims in the UK who are, I think white people feel, taking over the UK, but they're not using any weapons. They're simply following their religion and having babies and working consistently hard. These are all kind of Islamic values. Whereas when you don't have those values, you fall apart. Life falls apart, like you're not keeping to family values, therefore you're lonely, therefore you're depressed, therefore you kill yourself, which is the most common way white people are dying at the moment. I don't think Muslims are killing themselves by suicide, even though they just take a general statistic in the West. The most common way young men die, and I think that means 18 to 30 years old.
We're not even talking about the Palestinians anymore. We're just talking
right now
about these Westerners who, the thing is,
I've sidetracked a little bit. Okay, let me give the shortest possible answer. So, people don't realize that Israel depends on the Palestinian workforce, and already Israel some people might realize that Israel or Zionists are scared of Palestinians because they have so many babies and they're
Well,
going
they
to be
killed them now. They
outnumbered.
mowed the lawn, so they're going to get these Indians in. Right, that's what they're doing.
And
That's the
it didn't
plan.
work. And even if they brought the Indians, they wouldn't know how to manage the land because the Palestinians have learnt the technique over centuries and they know the land better and Indians would just get it wrong anyway. So the point is that if they kept to Islamic values, they would automatically run the country because the liberal Jews would die out, which they already are. There's very few religious Jews, and they don't even want to do anything anyway besides learn the Torah and get free money and stuff like that. The point is, I mean, anybody who looks at Israel is already ready to fall apart and for the taking if they just didn't fight, if the Palestinians didn't fight or didn't fight in a way that's against the Islamic values. So that's my short answer. Is it was going to happen already. I've had this discussion with the famous Zionist in Speaker's Corner. He agreed as well on that kind of technique, but he didn't really like that answer, but he knows it's true. So that's my solution. It might be very confusing or surprising for people who don't understand what's actually happening.
What you're saying, I'm afraid.
Sorry?
I don't even get what you're saying. It's like
you don't get what I'm saying. Okay, I'll put it this way.
It's going to happen. We don't need to do anything.
No, I'm saying.
I haven't.
Okay, do you get that? Okay, let me just give you a yes or no, give you some questions quickly. Do you get that Muslims are taking over the UK without any weapons?
Yeah, I mean demographically, but we're not talking about the Palestinians, are we?
But the Palestinians, the same method applies. If they didn't fight, they would.
Let's not do anything. Everything's just going to happen naturally. End of story. Is that the end of the discussion?
I mean, that's my argument. So it's not the end of the discussion. It's just there's so many things to discuss. That's one argument.
Well, I'd like to make my point.
Sorry, go on. What was? Yeah, I was wondering what your solution was.
I mean, all this time, but I have to, listen to. It doesn't matter. Everything's just gonna. So nobody is interested in obeying the commandment of chapter 18, verse 4. Nobody gives a shit. They're not going to do it, right?
No,
they're not going to do it.
I've already agreed with you. They should do that and all the other things.
You're not doing it, are you?
Sure,
is your caliph going to do it? No.
I think he might have written letters, but I don't know what the contents of the letters were. But yeah, maybe he hasn't done it.
He won't be doing it.
I'm trying to go through all the different arguments really quickly. So one argument is you should self-reflect and follow all the teachings of the Quran, and then God will help you. That's one. Then I wanted to say, for people who aren't convinced by this idea of just doing the right thing and God will help you, some practical way you can see that such a teaching would help. And that's why I was referring to how Muslims are taking over the UK without any weapons, just by being righteous. They're inheriting the land, just as the Quran says. So what the Quran says is kind of like a general and specific commandment. So it specifically refers to the Palestinian area, but it can be applied anywhere in the world. Be righteous, you will take over the world. You will inherit it without making any effort. And it's being demonstrated.
Everybody just be good. That's fine.
Yeah, so I gave an argument for it.
I mean, that's a platitudinous truism, isn't it? I mean, we're just wasting time talking about this.
Okay, cool. Let's respond to let's talk about the
You're not even interested in this subject, are you?
I think I am. That's why I'm talking about it.
No, but I've been trying to tell you, and you just.
I don't want to stick on just one tiny part of it.
And let's be good.
No. You're talking about a specific thing, which is the idolatry thing, right? But I want to say I agree with you. But let's keep moving.
All the others, you refuse to do it, right? You refuse to obey chapter 18, verse 4.
Let's say we agree.
Is the problem. The Palestinians are suffering because of people like you and other Muslims who pretend not to know what the hell I'm on about.
Sure. No. Wait. What we're trying to do is we're trying to go through all the different arguments.
No, let's read what she says. She's not going
Yeah,
to
let's
do it,
read
is
what she
she?
says. Go on.
She's got all her Christian cronies that she doesn't want to offend, right?
So you mean what she said on the screen, right?
She's
so
not
Nat
going to do
Turner
it. She's
did
not going
what...
to do it. She's not going to do it, and neither is anyone else going to do it. So if the Palestinians are suffering, it's because of you. Because these hypocrites, these Christians, they're going to say, oh, well, the Jews will always be the bigger victims. And, the Christians. What do the Christians want? I mean, the Christian Zionists are the ones in America voting for Trump, voting for the Democrats. They always vote because, they have to keep Israel going because they think they can hurry on the coming of the Messiah by converting the Jews there to Christianity. And when they've done that, the Messiah will come. That is their pathetic little belief that that keeps Christian Zionism going. And in fact, there are more Christian Zionists in America than there are Jewish Zionists, because a lot of the Jews saying, well, we don't want to be, condemned every time a Palestinian gets killed. And anyway, we don't want to live in Israel. We're happy living in America or Europe. So, we're not Zionists. People like David, I don't know if you've spoken to him. There are plenty of Jews who say, well, I don't want to go and live in Israel. I don't want to even be insulted over Zionism. And they're not interested. It's these Christian Zionists or these people who basically don't care. And they'll just say, well...
Yeah, okay, cool. So I agree that... as I said, we want to go through a whole range of arguments, yeah? So I agree, like you said, we should be following the Quran. One of the things you're focusing on, that's one of the many, right? So we can't focus on just that one argument, right? But it's an important one as well, that we should remind Christians that they are indulging in idolatry. Yes, one of the arguments. Okay, cool. But I do like to interact as best as I can with the comments. White Muslim women saying Finkelstein didn't say that Nat Turner was right. What he said was that he was not going to condemn him because he was extremely oppressed. I think that's a confused argument. So you either, if somebody does something, condemn, I don't know what condemn exactly means. I think it just means just saying something is wrong. Okay, maybe it's a harsher word of saying you're wrong, that thing is wrong. Either something is wrong or it's right. Okay, I think what Nat Turner did was wrong, according to Islamic theology, because you don't get to kill innocent civilians to gain your freedom. There's no example in Islam to do that kind of thing. There's no rule in the Quran that allows you to do such a thing. So therefore, he should have, if according to Islamic ideology, condemned both Nat Turner and condemned the Hamas's attack on October 7th. Straightforward. Because you can't use Nat Turner's example because that was wrong in the first place, even though it looks like, they have a right to their freedom and stuff like that. Islam has other solutions. That would be my answer. And I think most of what white Muslim women are saying is kind of similar. Let me see, what is this a bit different? I don't have to do every job in Islam. Example, I don't have to personally bury everyone if someone else in the community is.
That means nobody's asking her to be the undertaker.
Yeah, I think maybe she's saying that you don't have to be a perfect Muslim for God to listen to.
She doesn't have to mention the idolatry of the Christians around her. That's what she means.
Sure, that's what I think, yeah.
It's not her job to, point out the idolatry of the Christians.
Right. Yeah, so I would say you should always try your best in everything. So maybe I'm thinking about what Claire is saying, and I haven't told Christians that they are idolatrous. because maybe I didn't take it seriously enough. So
Yeah, because
Christians,
they
you
don't
guys,
care. Even if you
sure,
win all the arguments and point out, is it true that Jesus was convicted and crucified for blasphemy? Yes, it's it's
sure,
an entire story, right? That he was crucified, and
sure,
it's like, well, why do you worship somebody crucified for blasphemy?
yeah, sure,
And there's no
yeah,
answer. So, but it's kind of an open goal, and nobody. It's like, well, you know, you could ask why it's bad, why idolatry is bad, and you could say, well, if you're going to be idolaters, it just means that you're trusting your government to make up the rules as they go along, instead of following a moral system that is contained in a book, because if there's a finite list of rules that you believe your government is supposed to be obeying, then you can't let them get away with changing the rules. But they've gotten away with so many things, even in America with the First Amendment,
yeah,
because, well, a lot of Americans complain they have no right to express their views and they get cancelled if they say the wrong thing. So they've lost their First Amendment rights.
yeah,
So it's like
sure,
a list of rules is only as good as the people prepared to defend them. And
yes,
basically, because they're all atheists, because they don't really believe in God, even the Christians don't really believe. They just pretend to be Christian so they can continue to reject Islam. I mean, that's the only
sure, that
reason.
could be a reason, yeah. So okay, so let's just whiz through. Somebody said read this particular book, but we want like people are not going to read this book, although I think I've read some of it, but unless Dharmiza, you say why they should read it, so we could come back to that. Please comment. Like what specific argument is there that would entice people to read that book, and where can they read it from? Well, they can. You can search that book, and you'll find it free on the internet anyway. And then Palestinian issue isn't because the Palestinians are wrong, it's because the other Muslims are wrong. But I see that's a dangerous argument. What you're saying there, white Muslim women, is that the Palestinians are being punished because the rest of the Muslims are terrible. So I don't think that argument holds much logic. What do you think? What do you think about that argument that Palestinians are not being punished? They're suffering because the rest of the Muslims are bad. What do you think about
Well,
that
yes,
logic?
yes, because they've lost their caliphate, right? And nobody's even
Yeah.
talking about how to restore it, because we
So
know
do you
that the Sunnis are
agree
fighting
with
the
her
Shias.
argument? Do you agree with white Muslim women that Palestinians are suffering because of the rest of the Muslims? I think there is some argument there. Like if parents misbehave, their children suffer. So there is a communal effect of doing the wrong thing. Other people suffer when you do the wrong thing. I think that's true, but I think it's a bit dangerous to say that Palestinians are suffering even though they're innocent, and they're only suffering because the rest of the Muslims are not.
Well,
So
yes, because they're not doing anything. It's like the Gulf kingdoms are kingdoms, right?
sorry,
Kingdoms
the what?
are
The
they
Gulf
not?
kingdoms? Kingdoms? Yeah.
They are monarchies.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I agree. The
And
Gulf
in
are basically
Saudi,
monarchies. Yeah.
Islamic scholars are routinely jailed or even executed for Facebook posts and giving the wrong interpretation of the Quran. So I guess all these Sunnis who live in kingdoms are afraid to say anything in case they get thrown in jail.
Hmm.
And so this basically invalidates Sunni opinion, because you can't trust an Islamic scholar to give a true opinion, because he's afraid of his absolute monarch signing his death warrant or putting him in jail.
Sure. So yeah, we all know that. Let's say the scholars in these particular Muslim countries have to stay in line with the political, whatever ideas of their kings. They're not simply going to tell the truth, right? Okay, fair enough. Um,
I don't hear any
Yeah.
Muslim discussing any of this.
Yeah, so you're right. So it's very rare, or we don't know of Muslims generally pointing out that Muslims could be wrong. Is that what you're saying? They're not talking about their faults and what could be causing all this weakness.
Well, I mean, I've tried, to ask, like, if you were to restore the caliphate,
Yeah,
who would be the caliphate? Who would
right.
be the caliph? And I'm saying it would have to be the most powerful Islamic republic in the world. And that would be
That's
Iran.
one way of
But the
looking at
Sunnis would
it.
never agree to it.
But the most powerful could be most corrupt. So I think the caliphate is a spiritual entity that's decided by God. So, for example, God didn't pick the most powerful country in the world to become Muslim. In fact, he basically always does the opposite. He always picks weak people, and like, for example, Moses was made weak and then he became a prophet. And caliphate and a prophet are similar things in the Quran. Adam is described as a khalifa. So I wouldn't say you have to pick the strongest people and pick a caliphate from that. I would say God picks the most righteous people and they win despite being weak, and they overcome, just like the Muslims overcome the Persian and the Roman empires despite being a nomadic, incredibly weak society.
Yes, it has been said that the Quran was given to the worst of people to show
Yeah.
What a difference that would make
Yeah.
if only they obeyed God's laws.
Yeah.
So, but then, what's the point of being given a book if you never refer to it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
or even talking about
Agreed.
the important matters. I mean, you would have thought in the 21st century, people would be republics. I mean, countries would be republics by now. The Americans showed us the way, because the whole point of the founding fathers and the Revolutionary War was saying we're not going to listen to you anymore, King in England, because you're a tyrant, and Christian kingdoms were basically absolute monarchs. And eventually they were all destroyed, starting with the King of France during the French Revolution, and the Tsar of Russia was also an absolute monarch, and they got rid of them. So you would have thought the penny would have dropped, after the American, French, and Russian revolutions, but they're still clinging on to their kingdoms. I mean, after all, Britain is still the world's most.
What do you mean by an absolute monarch? So somebody who doesn't care about any rules, they make all the rules, and
someone
you're
who
saying
signs your death warrant, like
So you're saying it's a recipe for suicide or death or whatever by being an absolute monarch. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because the monarch is above the law.
Do you think the people who's the monarch of Dubai? Do you think he's an absolute monarch, allowing lots of Westerners there and capitalism to do its thing? There's a lot of freedom there, no?
I haven't been there, but a lot of people have been saying that there's been a lot of liberalization in the Gulf states.
Sure.
And I actually know
Saudi as well.
an Arab saying, well, where can I go with everybody liberalizing? Is there anywhere in the world I can go to where my children will be brought up with Islamic values? And it appears that there isn't anywhere, really.
Yeah. There don't seem to be many places which are truly Islamic, I guess. But I don't believe in a perfect world anyway. So I like Jordan. It's fairly Islamic in many ways. But anyway, I think, is there something to agree with? I think, let's try to agree maybe possibly with white Muslim women that because you've been pointing out that the suffering of the Muslims is because they don't have a caliphate, and white Muslim woman is saying something similar. I'm sorry if I've paraphrased you, white Muslim women. That's not my intention. I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. Um, but you also agree, white Muslim women, that we're weak, or Muslims are weak because they're disunified. So, and people might not know, but Ahmadi Muslims do have a caliphate. So I suppose we all agree that disunity is a major issue, and probably we all agree we should have a caliphate, because I remember white Muslim women at some point jokingly decided she was a khalifa and stuff like that. So I think we all agree there should be a caliphate. Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
And obviously people in the Ummah should choose.
Yeah. So there is essentially a democratic system to choose a caliphate. And I would say it's guided by God. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, that's just a whole maybe different argument, but we could go into that. We've got 5 minutes left. But I would say my argument would be, if you believe in God, then you would assume God hasn't forgotten his people or, creation, and he would do what. And if you believe in God and you believe in Islam and all the previous religions, you would see the pattern that God is the one who selects and supports some person to be the Khalifa. So I would say God, if he's still alive, and God is still alive, is directing all this stuff and solving it. But people might say the Ahmadi Khalifa, well, he's not solving all the problems, but you can only solve all the problems, like Claire said, if you listen to the religion. And so the Khalifa's job is to remind people to follow the religion, and then everything else will follow. That's nice to see you, Midu. Hopefully you are agreeing or benefiting. Let's see. Oh, he's not interested in having a caliphate after all, even though you wanted to be the Khalifa, but maybe that was a joke. Okay. Cool. Anyway, so last 3 minutes. Can you summarize whatever you want to say about our discussion today, Claire, please?
The only way to undermine the neocons is to call out.
So I'm stupid. So
Okay.
neocons, remind me what they are as you make your argument.
Remind you what?
Can remind us all, because I keep forgetting, who are the neocons while you make your final statement.
Nobody cares about American foreign policy because
nobody cares.
It's
Fine,
neoconservatism is just a euphemism for Western foreign policy, for
Sure.
American foreign policy, and neocon wars. There have been quite a few. The latest one is in Syria. They've got rid of
the overthrow
Assad,
of,
they got rid of Gaddafi, they killed Saddam Hussein, they invaded Afghanistan, those neocon wars, the wars of America. That nobody knows about. Neoconservatism is not within the consciousness of most people. They're the ones running American foreign policy that nobody cares about. So I guess most people don't care really about Israel or Palestinians, because it's like if you don't pay attention, then Jews are always being killed, and so are Arabs. Who cares about them? We're not Jews, we're not Muslims, who cares? End of story. That's how most people think, until it affects them, and increasingly it's affecting more people. And I'm saying, if people ever complain about the government, it's really about a question of morality. And morality is about having principles, and if you have laws saying you do this or don't do that, then you could be said to have principles. But Christians have no principles. I mean, do you know what Christian principles are?
No, nobody knows, because they watered down. They continuously water down their religions. They're not even anti-gay anymore. So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, they don't even have the principle of worshipping the Trinity, because if you ask them what it is, most of them don't even know. It's all about being respectful about Jesus, and that's it.
Sure.
And they don't know anything about the Trinity. But anyway, they're quite happy to obey the law of the land as long as it doesn't
To
get them into
summarize,
trouble.
like, because we're almost
Yes,
dead. I
yes.
mean, finished.
So I'm
So
saying there is
has
a
God?
problem with these people who don't have a religion and who continue rejecting the best available guide to humanity with all these rules about warfare and gender relations and labor relations and consumer relations, but they continue to reject it because they worship their idol of Islamophobia. And Muslims could be calling them out on it and say, look, if you're still a Christian after all this time, you must be an Islamophobe, because why else would you be a Christian? Why would you pretend to worship a Jew when you don't even like Jews? That's what they do.
Sure. Yeah. Worship
And
of
when you
Jews.
tell
Yeah.
them, they don't
Jesus.
care.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Sure. Okay. Cool. All
all
right.
right. Thank you
So.
for having me.
Okay, no, but I'll give my 1 minute summary, I guess. My 1 minute summary is the Quran tells, so God is God allowing Palestinians to suffer? And I would say yes, because God is all powerful. And one of the reasons is because, like Claire was saying, and I agree, that Muslims are not following Islam. And if they did, they would be all super powerful like they were in the past, or relatively following it, at least better. So follow Islam. Islam has very clear solutions to this very specific problem of the land of Palestine. Do check out the description where it tells you you will simply inherit the land. And I've given logical reasons why that theological solution would work practically in the world. That's it, really, I guess. And two wrongs don't make a right. And I don't agree with Normal Finkelstein, even though he's very smart. That his arguments are things like terrorism in the past from Nat Turner he was considered a hero. And some people even argue, like Nelson Mandela, he was a terrorist and now he's a hero. That's not really an argument. If you're a terrorist in the past, doesn't mean, like Nelson Mandela didn't continue being a terrorist, and he wasn't successful because he was a terrorist or something in the past. So don't believe in freedom fighters and that kind of sort. I don't believe in freedom fighters if they are terrorists and they break Islamic laws. The Islamic laws are really clear, and if you follow them you will win in the long term. That's it, really. So thank you very much. Claire, always appreciate you always being available. You do come up with really controversial and interesting arguments based on the Quran as well. So I appreciate that. And we've all got something to improve on and learn, including myself. Thank you all for your time, including white Muslim women and everybody else. Thank you very much. Bye.